Welcome to Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and this is the 2022 Hyundai Elantra N. Now, unfortunately, the Veloster N, the little three-door hot hatch, is dead as we know it because only a few people ended up buying those, but there are still other N cars to be had, and this is one of them. Hyundai's got this, which is the spiciest Elantra, the spicy Elantra, if you will, and they've got the Kona N, which is a little crossover-y dealy, which hopefully we'll get to drive at some point in the near future. So let's talk about what this Elantra N is, and then we'll get it out on the road and talk how it is to drive both on the highway and on some twistier bits of the road. All right, so what is the 2022 Hyundai Elantra N? How do they make it the N and not just the N line, which is more of a visuals thing than anything else? Well, to get to the Elantra N, you have to start with a different drivetrain, and you get the same thing that's in the Veloster N, our dearly departed friend. That is a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. In this case, it makes 276 horsepower and 289 pound-feet of torque. And that is paired to either a 6-speed manual transmission, which is standard, yes, or you can get a wet clutch, dual clutch automatic, which is fantastic and frankly probably the better transmission choice if you want to just go really quickly around a racetrack. But we'll talk about this in the driving portion. The 6-speed manual can be a pretty good choice if you want some actual driving enjoyment versus flat-out track time speed. Now, all these Elantra Ns are front-wheel drive, and they all have a standard limited slip differential. Another win. Thank you so much, Hyundai, for putting that in there, because that helps keep power to both wheels, not just the one that has the least amount of rolling resistance. Of course, handling is controlled significantly by the tire that is put on the car. In this case, Hyundai gives you a Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tire, and you have to think about stopping as well, and these brakes are upsized over any other Elantra, both on the front and rear axles. Now, looking back here, there are a couple other important things going on. The first one being the Aero, the body kit going on with the Elantra N. You've got this wing on the trunk that complements a bunch of other little Aero improvements elsewhere. Does this improve Aero at high speeds? Yes, I'm sure it does something. I think it's also mostly just here to look cool, and you know, I don't hate the look. What does improve performance overall, which is the same as on the Elantra N line, is the rear suspension layout and design, because on the Elantra in particular, Hyundai offers several different rear suspension setups. You can have an independent rear suspension like this Elantra N has, or you can have a torsion beam setup, which is helpful for packaging in certain cases. It can be a little more inexpensive to build, but if you're looking for performance, the independent rear is going to be the better option for you. This car has independent rear, and that is paired to adaptive shocks, adaptive dampers, if you will, and those are adjustable at all 4 corners of the car, and they are controlled by your drive mode settings inside the vehicle. Now, you'll notice I've left this car running while I'm filming because I cannot get enough of this exhaust note, and this is of course a unique exhaust to the Elantra N. No other Elantra will have it, and it is an active valved exhaust, so it can get louder or quieter based on your drive mode. This is in the full-on N mode, and this is just at idle. You can probably hear it with me talking still. It's pretty good sounding for a 4-cylinder, I think, and you'll hear when we're driving how it sounds when you really open it up and let the engine sing a bit. And then finally, Hyundai said, look, we're not stopping at just doing suspension, we're not stopping at wheels and tires and brakes, we're also gonna do some chassis stiffness tweaks because that makes the car drive that much better. So they gave the car a front strut tower brace, which goes across from one shock absorber to the other, and then you can probably see it here, it's bright red, so I hope you can. In the trunk, there is a chassis brace that adds stiffness left to right across the rear of the car. Now, I find this kind of amusing because they still gave this car folding back seats, so, well, the levers are there. Yeah, still has a folding back seat, but you've got this brace in the way. But that's okay. If you want to haul big things in your Hyundai N car, buy a Kona N. And then beyond all that, they also gave the car a bigger rear sway bar, which will give it a little bit more of a tendency to want to oversteer in certain situations, which can honestly help with turn-in if you care about that on a back road, at an autocross, on a track day, those sorts of things, versus the standard sway bar size that's on a lesser Elantra that they sell. So that's what they've got going on with this Elantra N. Let's get behind the wheel and talk about how this thing is to drive. Onto the Penna Turnpike. I don't know what a Penna is, but that's the abbreviation, so. We are going to pit race to drive a not Hyundai, but in the meantime, let's talk about driving this 2022 Hyundai Elantra N. This This is another N car after they did the Veloster N, which they discontinued because not enough people were buying it, but it was a great, fun little car that I really, really enjoyed. I had the privilege of driving two of them, one with the stick shift and one with the DCT, which are the same two drivetrains they offer in the Elantra N. So in both cases, it's that 2-liter Turbo 4. This is the 6-speed manual, of course, and then that DCT is a wet DCT, like what you get in a GTI. So point being, it's a little smoother, it wears better as the car ages, that sort of thing. But let's talk about this Elantra N and how it is to drive. I am road tripping it, so I'm going to have a lot of miles on the clock by the time I bring it back. And I'm playing with all the drive modes, I'm feeling everything out, and you can probably hear the exhaust. I've got it in the full-on N mode now just to be silly. Let's see, we got to get through a toll booth here first. So it's rev matching for me. There's a red button here. This would be for the N grin shift if you had the DCT. In this case, it turns on and off the automatic rev matching. But in any case, in full N mode, it's got this overrun on purpose. You can hear it popping and crackling, and that's all fine and good. In the lesser modes, it doesn't quite do that. But comfort overall, the first thing I want to talk about, this is a car that's very clearly meant for tall people, which I really love as a tall person. I'm 6'1", I'm kind of evenly split for torso and legs, but it's a comfy car. I can be very well set up in here for seating position. The seats at first I thought were not very comfortable. I'm happier with them the more I drive. They are manually adjustable, and you have to play with them to get them just right. Now, just since we have a spot here to run this out, it's so this car feels punchy and quick. I wouldn't say it feels fast necessarily, which is interesting because I thought the Veloster N felt kind of fast. And obviously this is dragging around more weight. This is like a little over 3,100 pounds. If you get the DCT, you add 110 pounds to that, so that would be more weight still. But regardless, plenty of power and torque on tap. You do not get the overboost function with the 6-speed manual. You only get that with the DCT. So that kind of, like it's, like as it says, it's overboost. It'll give you a little extra horsepower. It's plenty of horsepower. It's plenty fast. It just doesn't feel it because I think it kind of tapers off toward the top of the revs. They say peak power is from 5,500 to 6,000, and you can rev it all the way to 7. So like there's not a whole lot of point really in going quite all the way up there. Beyond that, the clutch is really nicely weighted. It's easy take up, it's easy to drive in the city, easy on the highway, progressive as far as where the bite is, and it's something you could deal with in traffic and be totally fine with. And then the shifter itself is actually a pleasure. It's decent throw length. It's not anything too crazy. It's not super short, not super long. It's not ropey. It's pretty solid engagement, and just easy shifts. I really like the shifter in this car. So the whole manual transmission is very well thought out. I hope enough people buy them to where Hyundai can keep making them, because a lot of people are going to pick the DCT. DCT's probably the one to get if you want like the fastest, way around a racetrack. That's how it always goes. But this is actually an enjoyable stick shift to drive if you just like that experience. So kudos to Hyundai for doing it, and kudos to making it good, because a lot of them, it's easy to make it kind of ropey and rubbery and and this is not that. So really like that. The other thing I really like in this car is the ride quality. So this has adaptive dampers, so they can get stiffer and softer based on your drive modes, and I just think it rides so nice. Even right now, it's turned all the way up to full stiff, and we're on the highway, we're on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and this is a pretty well-maintained road, but it feels nice. Earlier on my drive, I was on less well-maintained bits of highway, and even in N mode, it was not super crashy or anything, and in comfort mode, it rides so well. So big kudos to Hyundai there. The steering is variable effort, and it will get, you know, heavier based on the sportier drive mode you choose, or you can customize it in your individual settings. And it's really heavy around town if you have it turned up pretty high. So there is a real difference in having comfort mode there versus not. On the highway and at higher speeds, I don't mind the weight. I kind of like it. So I'm actually enjoying driving this car in the full N mode, even on the highway, just because I like the noise. It turns the exhaust up because it's got that valving in the exhaust. I have the active engine noise through the speakers turned off right now. So everything you're hearing, this is just engine. But feels good. It's happy to play between like 3,000 and 5,500 RPM, which I know is right when the peak power is made, but it's torquey. So it feels good there. And, you know, you'll find yourself shifting it a good bit if you're in the mountains, because in sixth gear, you know, you need to get out of sixth and make it rev to make it feel really happy and like it's starting to produce power. But like I said, it's an enjoyable shifter, so I really, you know, I appreciate that, and it's not like it's irritating or anything to deal with. Otherwise, you've got your two N buttons on the steering wheel. One of them will go to full N mode, one goes to your custom mode that you set up in the touchscreen, which is pretty easy to deal with. It's a good system. It's the same as everything in every other Hyundai product. When you're in N mode, you get a custom gauge cluster, and I really like it because they have thought through, if you were to take one of these to a track day in particular, what matters the most. So your speed is actually quite small on this screen if you're in N mode, and what it actually shows much larger is a large tachometer, which love, and then on the left side you've got oil temp and coolant temp, and then on the right, less important but neat to see, how much boost the car is making and how much torque the engine is producing at any given time. Having the oil temp and the coolant temp really big, just as big numbers, is really nice because it matters, especially if it's a hotter day, especially with a turbocharged car. You know, you really want to just keep tabs on that stuff. I'm not saying a brand new car should be overheating, but if you're running one of these at a track on a hot summer day, especially with, you know, a lot of elevation change or something where you're just pushing hard, you got to keep an eye on that. So love the fact that they created a mode on the digital cluster that will do that, and then otherwise when you're in any of the other, you know, more comfort oriented drive modes, it can just put regular gauges back up on the screen, which is more what you want. As far as everything else going on in here, I love the low belt line. I can see everything. The screens are down and out of my way. It's good visibility. Even out the back, it's not terrible. It's fairly good for being a brand new car. They've also kept some physical buttons for everything, which I love, between the steering wheel, of course, kind of corporate Hyundai N steering wheel. If you've seen the Veloster N, you'll recognize this. But you've got real buttons for your infotainment controls here. You've got real buttons for your dual zone climate control, real buttons for your heated seats and, you know, your defrosters and things, drive mode and cameras down here. And then the only other thing really to talk about is the brakes, and they feel really good. The initial bite is appropriate for the car. It's not too soft or too strong, and they kind of come on progressively. It's easy to really throw your weight into the brake pedal and bring it down to a stop quickly, or if you don't need to do that, bring it down much more progressively. It's just a very well-tuned car. This feels so much different from the Elantra N line that I drove earlier this year, which is, you know, more or less a regular Elantra that they put a stick shift in and, you know, gave a couple little tweaks here and there, but it's not really meant to be the hot one. This is the hot one, and this feels far more special than the N line, which is a good thing because, you know, they have to differentiate the two. But if you're a driving enthusiast, this is the one to get. And honestly, this is an interesting car. Not gonna hit anything. And honestly, this is an interesting car. It's a fun car. I love the giant dual exhaust out back. I love the red details around the bottom of it. I think it's got some controversial styling going on, especially at the front, but if you're okay with that, this is a really good car to drive. I appreciate all of the chassis stiffening that Hyundai did, and I appreciate, you know, just what they did to really make this thing different. It's not like they just threw, you know, a bigger turbo on it and called it a day, or they just did a couple things. They really thought through the whole car, and it feels like it. It's really pretty good. And, you know, I love having the limited slip diff because with just front wheel drive, even with the big tires, these are, you know, 245 section width Pilot Sport 4S's, they're a great tire. But with front wheel drive, you really have to be careful trying to put power down. And I'm not of the opinion, like a lot of people are, that all-wheel drive solves everything. I think all-wheel drive kind of, you know, it makes things much more usable, sure, but it also kind of can dull the experience. And why not make a kind of cracked out front wheel drive sports sedan? I think the idea is fantastic, but you have to make it be able to put power down and not torque steer, and the LSD really helps with that. So kudos to Hyundai for putting the real hardware in here. All right, and that is it for this review of the 2022 Hyundai Elantra N. Thank you so much for coming along. As always, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe right here on YouTube. Give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. And if you'd like to connect with some fellow LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, head over to outmotorsports.com. We've got a whole bunch of people over there that would love to get to know you, both in person and online at some of our events. Till next time, please stay safe, be well. See you again soon.